In a world with much to discover, for what is, what was, and what could be, I welcome you to this month's meeting with the Order. On tonight's podcast, we have our panel of judges, Paleop and Paleo Dude. How are you gentlemen this evening?
We are doing fine.
He doesn't speak for me.
I am doing fine.
So, I guess this is basically how the podcast will work. Each one of us has a different topic that we're going to be that each of us will introduce, and then we'll discuss that for a little bit, and then we'll move on to the next person who will introduce their topic, and then we'll discuss that, and so on and so forth, and then we'll end it all with a nice little Q&A session at the very end. If you would like to submit your own questions, there is a link down in the description below to various social media accounts that we have that you can submit questions to. And if you're lucky, then the next one will be, then your question might get answered, on the next installment of the podcast.
Hold on.
All right, Alex, you want to hit us up with the first topic?
Yes, I do. Okay. So, the fossil record is an incredibly beautiful way of preserving the subtle nuances about our past. But it's never complete. In fact, when you start to realize just how stacked against you are at becoming a fossil, it really puts a different perspective on the fossils that we have currently. It really makes every single specimen a tiny miracle in their own right, or a big miracle, depending on what kind of fossil we're looking at. To put this into perspective, out of all the species that have ever existed throughout the entirety of the history of life on Earth, only a small fraction of that will actually live in areas where fossilization can occur. And out of that lot, only a small fraction actually has the hard parts that increase the likelihood of becoming a fossil. So things like shells, bones, teeth, etc. And then out of that lot, only a small fraction will actually become a fossil. And out of that lot, only a small fraction will survive the test of time long enough so that they can, long enough to increase the chances of them being found by humans. In other words, they've survived past erosion, rock slides, and tectonic subduction. And finally, out of that lot, only a small fraction will actually be uncovered by humans, or at the very least, some sort of intelligent creature smart enough to recognize what it is and then dig it up. And so I asked the panel tonight, what do you think could be lost in the fossil record?
Well, for one, I await you, Bigfoot. Think you're hiding somewhere in that fossil record, you know? I believe Bigfoot is actually a hidden fossil record, and I will not don't at me on Twitter. I will take no answers for a response.
If he's not hiding in the woods, he's hiding in the rocks, eh?
Yeah, he burrowed himself down to hide his bones for Satan, in my opinion. But in all seriousness, I am, with all the stuff that's been coming out of Appalachia, I'm actually quite interested to see what comes out of that. We just have fragmentary crap from that. You got Appalachiosaurus, of course, but I am curious to see if it follows the same trends as the rest of Maastrichtian North America, in terms of environmental diversity, or maybe we have like a new environment. I haven't yet seen something more akin to Southern Hemisphere, but we can only hope,
That's interesting. So are you saying it'd be more something along the lines of, like, just in theory at least, something a bit more in the lines of, like, South America or something like that? Are you hoping for carnosaurs?
Well, I think that's there's always that love of like allosaurids and stuff, and I will fully admit I'm a full big Majungasaurus fanboy. Silurisaurians, while they're cool, and yeah, you survived the extinction, don't brag about it. But all seriousness, I doubt we'll probably find any there. Probably just Cerullosaurians being the overruling tyrants that they are in every single niche, But
yeah, I imagine that
it
they're...
would be interesting.
I'm sorry, keep going.
No, I finished my statement after you.
Well, I was just saying, to add to that, Silurisaurians were definitely were very competitive groups of animals, but yeah, I mean, that would be quite interesting. Do you think that there could be something more hidden there, though, like beyond dinosaurs? Do you think that there could be some sort of new mammals that we haven't found yet, or something?
Well, I think the biggest problem with the other things, it seems like most, if not all of North America has this incredibly strong preservation bias. Again, at least during the late Cretaceous, and certainly a little bit before, where small to medium-sized animals like most dromaeosaurids and ornithopods tend to not be as common as you see these large ceratopsians or tyrannosaurids, at least in the later period. I mean, we only have so much of Pachycephalosaurus itself, despite it being such a iconic Hell Creek fauna. You and saying,
yeah, definitely.
To say that we're getting even the common fossils so rare inside of Appalachia, it worries me to think that we've lost a good deal of smaller microfauna from the area, to say the least.
Yeah, that has always been something interesting, because like with smaller animals, it's a lot less. Because of the fragility of the fragile nature of the bones. That alone was already stacked against them, making them unlikely candidates. But at the same time, with larger animals, it takes more sedimentary deposit to bury them. So,
yeah, it's just not exactly. I think it's simply just because of the way most North American fossils are preserved, with the traditional sedimentary way, freshwater environments or very brackish environments, where we don't have these really fine sediments and quick dispersal of sediment, where we won't find, specimens like Anchiornis or Archaeopteryx or Microraptor, any of these small, well-preserved animals. I think that's a real shame. I think animals like those Euornithine, if we have any the dino bird, as Elena call it, would be interesting to say the least.
Yeah. One thing that's kind of interested me very much is the idea of like alpine dinosaurs, or any kind of animals that lived during the Mesozoic era, that lived in the high mountains. Because that is an area where sedimentary deposition pretty much doesn't occur. So any kind of animal becoming a fossil in those areas is virtually impossible. But let me ask you.
I have another Otzi the Iceman, but it's a reptilian person,
Yeah.
But it's odd. It's
If
an
I
odd.
may.
Oh, after you, sir.
Just to add to the list of different biomes that things have trouble preserving in, we could also add things like fossil sites you can't access. For example, really unstable cliffs or ocean sediments.
Right.
Things like island fauna. They'd have a really low chance of being preserved and excavated, just due to them being near the sea. Imagine some island out in the middle of the Atlantic that used to exist but ended up sinking. You're not going to find any bones there, and you're not going to get any excavation teams out there.
That's true.
I'll scuba down there. I'll get my nice trowel. I'll find it. Don't you worry, your pretty little head.
It's also it's kind of interesting.
And along with that, you also get the loss of a lot of interesting fauna. Just look at the dodos and other stuff like that. Very rare, unique, interesting. Even late surviving fauna, like let's say early Cretaceous, you might have some island stegosaurs.
Yeah, they might have been able to. Stuff like that is also interesting. The idea of large of groups of animals like that surviving much further past what we thought they did. I mean, I know that there were stegosaurs in the Cretaceous, weren't there? But like very early.
Yes, I think they died out early to mid Cretaceous. Kind of.
I think was it Waru or Roto?
I believe it's Wertosaurus. I remember that, like, always as a kid. Oh, it's Wertosaurus. That was the last one, but I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
I know Planet Dinosaur had one late Cretaceous in India, Dravidosaurus, although that's now been determined to be Plesiosaurus.
Right.
How'd you screw that up? You go from Stegosaurus to Plesiosaurus. But going back,
it's a chimeric specimen.
I mean, have you seen the neck on half of Stegosaurs? Those things have long neck.
Yeah. If you gave them just a few more million years of evolution, they could have turned into like sauropod type animals.
Just imagining like Diplodocus whiptail, but like Thagomizers at the end and just worried beyond belief.
And a beak.
I mean, you got Dicryosaurs, which basically are sauropods trying to become stegosaurs.
Very true.
Yeah.
But going back to the island thing, one thing that's kind of interested me when you brought that up, what kinds of organisms must have existed on Zealandia? Do you guys know what that? You guys know what that is, right?
Yeah, the lost continent.
Yeah. Now, when did that split off from the rest of Gondwana? Was it 80 million years ago?
Let me quick Google's 60 to 85 million.
60 to 85 million?
I'm reading 60 to 85.
Oh.
Huh. But the way I understand what you're saying there, it really, I mean, an entire continent, a small continent, sure, but a continent nonetheless, full of unique fauna, to say the least.
And now that continent, apart from just a few small bits, basically the tallest mountains of that continent, it's pretty much gone.
I mean, just look at New Zealand today. I mean, we have birds trying to be anteaters, birds trying to be puppies, birds trying to be
mice,
chimps, I guess, for Kias, but
carnivorous parrots that eat sheep alive.
They eat sheet metal if they could. I mean, this thing, Kia, some of the coolest things. I wish we had some sort of dinosaur discovered, or at least with some brain case similar to it, where we have the almost intelligent look of it, or because it's. I find it
don't get too ahead of us, because we are going to come into that in just a second.
Oh, I will zip my lip then.
About Zealandia, I've heard some things about some post-KPG Megaraptorans.
Yeah,
just like a fossil. It could have been just a bunch of them that died during the impact and just were preserved a little bit after.
Would you dodge the bullet but fall off a cliff in the meantime?
Yes. Now, I've heard that exact same scenario. I've heard a lot of people speculate on that exact type scenario happening not in Zealandia but in Antarctica. Which, by the way, that is a continent that has always, that from a fossil hunting standpoint, has always fascinated me. Just what, there is an entire United States-sized patch of land that could have a whole bunch of fossils on it that could completely change everything we know about prehistory. But we can't access it because it's all buried under ice. What do you guys
I
think?
say we just speed up global warming, get those smokestacks running. Let's go. Let's burn those penguins, boys. Burn them all alive.
We'll have plenty we'll have plenty of penguin and seal meat to feed us on the expedition.
Yeah, just start a penguin bonfire. There we go. I mean, does anyone care about Antarctica? Oh my God. I'm as always. I'm joking.
Antarctica?
I understand what you're saying. I had a friend of mine go down to Antarctica. A trip for Lystrosaur expeditions. It's criminally underfunded the way they have so much to work with and they have so much to find, but no one's gonna actually go into there. Because, it's a frozen wasteland where people have died quite frequently,
Yeah.
It's not the best place.
And you can only go there, basically, like, you can only go on an expedition there, like, a couple months out of the year.
I say they're just weak for not going there all year long.
I mean, it's just a little hypothermia. You'll thaw out eventually.
Yeah. It worked for them. I mean, people were just able to, eat some dogs, stay here long. Worked for the first expedition. It'll work for the latest.
Yeah. Ice will melt. Scars will heal. Actually, scars don't heal. But
fingers, however, don't grow back.
Yeah, you can get a prosthetic limb. Whatever. Just cut the whole thing off. You'll get a much better all-American steel-made arm.
Yeah, all-American steel. Because, guys, the steel industry's coming back. I'll keep positive. Pal, you've been awfully quiet. You got any hopes for Lost Ant?
Any hopes?
Yeah.
Oh, I got a long list.
Secret race of anime women, I can tell.
No. No. Although early Cretaceous diplodocids, now those.
Oh, I thought there were some in like Argentina.
Not in North America.
Oh, not in North America.
Just generally assume when I talk about animals that relates to North America.
Ah, okay. Well, that's an interesting proposal. I mean, we've got macronarians and early titanosaurs, right?
Yeah, but the boy wants diplodocids. Get that boy diplodocid.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If they could make it, how come diplodocids couldn't?
Probably the decrease in fern prairies and the increase in floodplain. It's all about, it's all relative, I mean, if you take away my favorite food and change it to someone else's, I'm going to starve to death because I don't want to eat none of his stanky food.
Maybe a Hell Creek sauropod. Doesn't have to be a Pastosaurus. Could be kind of like what happened with the megasauropods. Like, just have a shorter Alamo.
Oh, you wish for too much.
Yes.
You poor boy.
I mean, next thing I'd wish for would be a Therizinosaurus, so you might want to retract that claim after I say that.
Oh my god. Oh. You and this Therizinosaur thing, you just need to let it go, bud.
I mean, I mapped the entire United States of North America with fossil footprints.
Here, real quick,
everywhere.
for the benefit of the audience, Paleop, why don't you go ahead and explain to us this whole thing about the Hell Creek Therizinosaur?
Oh. So a while back, I heard about the Cantwell Therizinosaur footprint. and I looked around for other potential theory footprints because I'd map them out on a diagram. So, oh god, it was a failure. Anyways, I made this whole diagram, mapped out the footprints, drew silhouettes of each footprint individualized, and just plotted them out, see if they could be around Hell Creek. And there were 3 locations that sort of created a triangle. However, turned out all of these footprints that were attributed to Tyrannosaurs were attributed quite a long time ago, and some recent studies referring to Oviraptorosaur footprints.
Too bad
have
on
come
some
out.
time.
Something smaller, though. These weren't all that big a footprint. So it turns out that, or not Ornithomimosaurs, Oviraptorosaurs rested their hallux on the ground, which kind of made them resemble Therizinosaurs, since Therizinosaurs used their 4th toe as a walking digit. So I plotted about 6 or 7. And I even messaged RJ, asking if they knew about this. And essentially, one by one, all these footprints, which I thought were Therizinosaurs, were proven to be Oviraptorosaurs.
Interesting.
Then Tyrannosaurs.
Except the Cantwell footprint, which appears to be from a animal the size of Northronicus grapham.
Speaking on that though, like when I first heard about this, I would have thought, I was thinking that it probably was some kind of descendant from Northronicus. So my question would be, even though it turned out that what you thought was evidence of Therizinosaurs actually wasn't, do you still hold out any hope that maybe we could one day find evidence of a Therizinosaur in Hell Creek? Or does it look like a pipe dream now?
I mean, the Cantwell footprint is definitely a Therizinosaur. So, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a Therizinosaur in Hell Creek. Anything from something like a Bapiosaurus to, well, something comparable to Tarbo's theory, which would be a hell of a find, to say the least.
Indeed.
Yeah, too bad it's made like 90% of turtle fossils. But don't worry, it's still a Therizinosaur, guys. It's just got some turtle in it.
Pretty ironic, isn't it?
That would be something if something somewhat chimeric were to turn out to be partially Therizinosaur.
Kind of going off the topic stuff from Hell Creek, I think.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we'll go ahead and wrap. I guess we'll start to wrap this up by talking about the one thing you kind of have to talk about this when you're talking about what could be lost in the fossil record. The idea of pre-human civilizations. Any thoughts?
Well, I think with what we've been shown to leave an impact on our Earth, just that the amount of plastic waste and the amount of just trash we make, I can't see anything on our industrial level being present before us, just simply because there's not that large amount of evidence for it. There's not that characteristic carbon footprint, shall we say. And, it could mean like, oh, the lizard people, they were really resourceful. They recycled and stuff. And, they're out there making a difference. But the fact we don't have a single piece of evidence towards any intelligence forming, no no tools, no higher buildings besides like most complex things we have are like bowerbird nests and termite. Even then, those are mostly made of dirt. So
Very true.
I wouldn't hold it likely, but if it could, I could maybe see it either being from corvids, or I could see later Maniraptor, most likely.
So you say that... sorry, go ahead, Bailey.
Well, I almost disagree with you, if only because I didn't think anything would have gotten to the stage that we would have. As far as that goes, I don't think... Okay, I do agree with you, I just have different reasoning. I think that there probably wasn't the selective pressure in order to use tools as efficiently as humans do, which kind of would have been one of the gate openers in order to lead to society, I guess. But I think if we were to look for any evidence, we might want to look at megafaunal changes, because if you look at humans, they've removed most of the megafauna at their time. So
That's an interesting point.
if you see some sort of correlation between intelligent dinosaurs and decrease in large fauna, then that could be, I wouldn't say evidence, but it could be hinting towards a possibility. So I doubt it happened. Or at least it would have had a very small impact.
Do you guys remember a little while back, C.M. Kozman said on one of his podcasts that the Permian extinction was interesting because because that was one of the only mass extinction events that we know of where insects were dramatically affected, and that hasn't and something like that hasn't really happened until you arrive to the present, where insects have been heavily impacted by the Industrial Revolution. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, climate-wise, kind of makes sense for insects to be themselves, be focused on. You know, you can say what you want just about the extinction itself, but the fact that when oxygen levels tend to decrease, insect diversity and size tends to decrease, and we see that happening in, at the very least, in Cambrian strata, shows signs of it going down. I think at the very least we have to look into the easiest explanation for an extinction first. All right, like what's more likely, this a super intelligent race of arachnids systematically eliminating all megafaunal insects, or the oxygen content simply dropping to a point on where it couldn't support these megafauna, right?
You want to cut out all the unreasonable assumptions first.
Yeah.
Basically. Makes sense.
So, as a little bit of a counter-argument, you could argue pesticides.
Very true. All right, so let me...
Very clearly.
I guess I'll finish this by asking just one more question, and that would be, let's say, just for the sake of argument, that we managed to find the fossil of an organism that was at least as smart as us, or at the very least as smart as, say, the ancient Romans. How would we know?
Hell would break loose. I'm just saying, you get a lot of people who are religious, for instance. Well, their panties would get in the wad. And so you get a lot of people trying to discredit it.
Well, I mean more like, how would we know that that was what we were looking at? Just by looking at the fossil of this organism.
You probably wouldn't.
I mean, you look at human anatomy itself, and if you so let's say 30 million years, we're all dead, we're all fossilized, and by some happenstance, alien comes down, finds a full skeleton of us. No context, so all our clothes are gone. We weren't carrying any tools. We were just dead, typical human. It would be hard to say clearly, even with context of other vertebrates around us, or even apes from ourselves, what would make us sentient, I would say, or what would make us this higher being. I mean, you look at us, and the majority of our adaptation are for savanna life and for either partial climbing or simply dexterity. And you can make the argument the human body looks more like, a savanna dweller or something like that. If you looked at a skeleton, you wouldn't see automatically, oh, yeah, that's a sentient being that can make four thoughts. I think if we were to ever find something like that, I think we definitely have to have those important context clues, like structures that aren't made by nature, like something like Stonehenge, for example, where clear effort or thought had been put into that to alter its environment, because that's what sentience is in its own right, is altering the environment to best suit yourself, right?
Right. So basically, without any kind, because that's kind of interesting. Because if you look at the context of the question, no one ever said what kind of organism it had to be. I mean, you could be looking at the beak of a late Jurassic cephalopod for all we know. You know what I'm saying?
Graboids.
Yes. I'm sorry, Paleop. Did you have something you wanted to say, or?
Yeah. Well, how we would judge it, just judging by what I've seen, is usually by the brain to body size ratio, which I guess is inherently flawed, because if you look at animals like reptiles, they usually have birds specifically have a higher neuron density. So, you're right on the context is basically required. I thought, how we domesticated a lot of animals?
I'd say we
That can
domesticated
also be a
a few.
signature to look for. Though how we would tell that, I'm not sure.
I guess
That's
you
the
could.
problem, is domestication. Is that a sign of intelligent life? Because you can argue that leafcutter ants have domesticated species of fungus, where they will farm them, and the ants can no longer, not the ants, the mushrooms, or the fungus can no longer produce spores. So it's completely reliant on the species of ant. So do we claim that the ant is sentient because it seemingly domesticated this species of fungus, or do we just simply say, oh, that's a unique symbiotic relationship? And I think that's a problem on where we draw the line, so to say.
That is an interesting thought right there. But I think, unless anybody has anything else to say on the matter, I guess the last thing that I want to go ahead and add before we move on is that this is another reason why I am so fascinated by this topic in particular, is because when you start to ask the question about what intelligent life might have looked like before humans came along, you inadvertently start asking questions about what it means to be human, in a sense, and what it means to, in this sense, we're talking about that we're not just talking about what intelligent life might have been like before us. We're talking about how aliens from the far future might perceive us. And there's a lot of interesting areas that you can go with that.
just see it's a bunch of little ape thoughts rolling around.
It's,
There's the complication of a lot of organisms think differently because of how their brain works. Like, look at a cephalopod and look at a human. Very different intelligences. So how would you even quantify those?
exactly.
End up one is sentient.
All right, I think
We
we're...
can,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I accidentally yawned a little bit. Sorry.
Did so easily. You're the reason why. You're the reason why. You're the reason why.
I guess we're ready to move on to the next topic. So, which one? Let's see. I guess Paleo Dude. How about you?
I'm fine going last if you wish to go, Paleo Dude.
All right. Might as well. My topic I bring to you today is a little less natural history focused, a bit more pop culture inspired, but nonetheless still relates to the topic. That relates to dinosaurs and other prehistoric life represented in Japan. And I think it's honestly quite interesting to see how it's weird because you look at 99% of Western dinosaur portrayal and you see that brown T-Rex with the lipless mouth and the big boxy head, and you see the big velociraptor, and you see the frilled Dilophosaurus, of course. You see this Jurassic Park inspiration every single dinosaur media, as it seems. You see it in art, you see it in you see it in toys on the shelf, you see it in Legos. This undeniable presence that we seem to have. But when you look to the east, you have seemingly no contact with that. You have the occasional Revoltech rack, or just the occasional bootleg, but a good majority of the art, the toys, the media from the east, Japan specifically, seems to come more of a place of early 90s Gregorius Paul dinosaur renaissance art. Feathers usually are very prevalent. I find this quite interesting simply because it seemingly gives us that view of a world without Jurassic Park, or at least one where it didn't have the cultural impact that it has today. Hundreds of movies, hundreds and hundreds of dollars of merchandise included.
That's very fascinating. Now, let me just say that with this topic, there's when you brought this up, there's two thoughts that like almost immediately jumped into mind. The first thing is that Americans tend to have a bit of a cult of celebrity, I guess you could say, and that might have something to do with it. I mean, we're a lot more Westerners tend to be much more focused on their media, and I'm sure that's the case with most other countries, but we kind of have Americans tend to have in particular tend to have a very special connection with their popular culture, more so than with scientific legitimacy. And then the second thing that I want to touch upon is something a little bit more ancient, and I'm wondering if this might have something to do with it. If you look at the way that Western cultures have depicted dragons, dragons in Western cultures are always kind of depicted as devilish creatures. They're always seen as big monsters that need to be killed. Whereas in the East, I won't say that they're always benevolent creatures, but they do have a lot more respect and reverence for them. And I can't help but admit that there's something kind of eerily similar going on here, from what you've just described. American pop culture tends to depict dinosaurs as these huge monsters, not really depicting them as regular animals. But then in the East, Japan in particular, you see them depicted more as like you said, Gregory Paul-esque, era-esque dinosaur, as animals, basically.
And then you just have Yoshi gone and all the little anime dinosaurs running around, being outliers. Making my argument wrong. Thanks, Yoshi.
We can just kind of brush those guys under the rug real quick.
Yeah, okay. Stay there with Devil Joe, will you?
Well, also another thing, one of their biggest, fictional celebrities, Godzilla. Basically a fusion of 3 different dinos or something.
That's true.
I will say, I think that Godzilla is less of a dinosaur than he is a metaphor for a great deal of cultural suffering on the part of the Japanese. I think whereas Godzilla represents the fear of humanity, it's interesting to note that Jurassic Park tends to put their dinosaurs as the fear of science, shall we say. And it's not to say Godzilla didn't have anti-science themes. It did have several when you look into it. But even then, the way Godzilla is portrayed as this force of nature half the time, or the folly of man another, it's almost completely different and alien compared to how it's often man who corrupts dinosaur in Western media, especially with the latest releases of Jurassic World and Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, where the dinosaurs themselves are not the problem. It's us bringing them back, and of course, making them shrink wrap little albinos. But in case they're,
I think they do kind of confuse the message though when in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom in particular. I noticed that they also try to go with the endangered species kind of angle with the dinosaurs. So I think that kind of confuses the message that they're trying to go with for the dinosaurs. These things shouldn't have been brought back in the first place, as far as the story. That's kind of what the whole Jurassic Park series has always been about. But I guess now that they're here, we just kind of gotta deal with it, or I don't know. Doesn't seem like it would be that difficult for us to kill them off.
A little bit back on topic, but Japan doesn't really have an equivalent to Hollywood, right?
well, I mean, there's a lot of, I guess there's the anime industry, but it's not very centralized, I would say.
True.
You have these big companies like Toho and Funimation and Gainax, and you have and Shonen, of course. You don't really have. You make a good point. You don't really have this big standard, shall we say? It's incredibly diverse.
To tie into that, usually success creates imitation, and you see with a lot of B films and stuff as well. You get a lot of copying of the Jurassic Park formula, and as well as that creature design. Meanwhile, in Japan, since you don't really have that,
It's very true. And something else that I've also noticed is that with American media in particular, it always is very slow in this transition between what was scientifically accurate 30 years ago. I went back and I noticed this. If you watch pretty much every mainstream dinosaur movie that Hollywood put out, basically right up until right before Jurassic Park, there really wasn't that many where the dinosaurs were walking in a horizontal bird-like posture. I mean, keep this in mind. I think it was the same year that Jurassic Park came out. Roger Corman's Carnosaur came out, and that had the dinosaurs walking upright, like they did back in the 60s or 70s, and or should I say the 50s? Because the 60s and 70s. That's when they started. That was when the dinosaur renaissance happened. That's when paleontologists were starting to say that dinosaurs walked in a more bird-like fashion with their tails up in the air and all that sort of stuff. So there's almost...
Although arguably, I mean, the same year, or I believe it was earlier, you had We're Back, a dinosaur story, so...
Yeah.
Let's be glad that one was kind of a stinker. So we don't have, singing John Goodman dinosaurs everywhere,
Right. But to be fair, though, I think that the animation industry, I think it's a little different than, live action in this instance.
Yeah, it's kind of odd. I know we had The Good Dinosaur. Was it 3 years ago now or 2 years? It's a forgettable movie, but yeah, Pixar, this big animation company. But even then, you look at their T-Rex family, and they all seemingly have that classic sepia brown to reddish kind of hue. That the Jurassic Park 1 Tyrannosaurus Rex was sporting this whole time, and now I guess the Jurassic World to a lesser extent. So it's like, even then, you have Jurassic Park touching even the animation industry in a way.
Yeah. It really is amazing just how much of an influence that movie had. I mean, like, even toys that aren't even remotely related to Jurassic Park. I see this every time I go into, like, a hobby shop. What are these small figurines? But basically, like, I forget what the company is called, but they are basically just... It's just the Jurassic Park T-Rex.
Popo. That would be Popo.
Popo? Yeah, I mean, it's got the same shaped head, it's got the same color scheme, everything.
Which ironically has led it to being used in Jurassic Park promotional material as stock imagery sometimes.
Yeah.
The cycle completes itself, as you say. Mm-hmm.
And also,
here, there.
And also, kind of going back to, like, something else Jurassic Park related, the Velociraptors. There's this movie trailer that came out not that long ago for, like, have you heard of this? It's called, like, the Dinosaur Games or something like that.
The Jurassic Games would be what it's called.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, even that one had, like, to a certain extent, it had much more accurate dinosaurs in there. It had a much more anatomically accurate T-Rex and other dinosaurs like that. But then you see the raptors again. I think they weren't Velociraptors. They were I think they were Utah Raptor. But again,
I couldn't be bothered to watch that movie. I'm going to be honest with you, pal.
I haven't seen it either. I just saw the trailer for it. But yeah,
what a stinker.
the featherless thing. Even though the models themselves looked great, and they probably would have looked even better with feathers on them. But that's also...
To be fair, it doesn't help that movies like Dinosaur Island kind of failed in that regard.
Very true.
With the feathered raptors.
But let me ask you a question.
Dinosaur Island was terrible in the first place.
Yeah,
I know. But if you had like a really good movie that also had really nice feathered raptors, probably would do something similar to JP.
Now, while we're on that subject, though, I do have to ask you, what do you think? Do you think that it would be practical for us to, not for us, but for the producers of Jurassic World to incorporate feathered dinosaurs into future movies, or do you think that it's kind of too late now for Jurassic Park? I mean, we would need some kind of a reboot or something.
Yes and no.
Because I mean, I've heard people
a soft reboot maybe, but it essentially would have to be new cloned stock. Because they can't really change the already existing stuff. And, well, as far as I know, they'd have to break through one little plot detail called the Noah wheel, which is what's preventing the dinosaurs from being feathered.
Well, I'm sorry.
So you'd probably see like a rival company to InGen if there's any chance of feathered dinosaurs making them.
Interesting. That would be kind of an interesting plot line, right? Plot device right there. But, yeah, I mean...
Yeah, but do
'cause
we
I mean-
really expect nuance and intelligence from the Jurassic World movies in this point?
Well, no, but... You know, I mean, I've heard people talk about this...
None of us expected.
I mean, I've heard people say this kind of stuff all the time, and, like, I think that if you want to see the raptors feathered in Jurassic Park, at this point, yeah, you're basically going to need some kind of a reboot to the franchise. But as it stands right now, I personally don't think it's particularly practical. And ultimately, I don't think that's what we need right now from just a filmmaking standpoint. I don't want to see. I would rather not see any more Jurassic Park movies. I'd rather see a new set of dinosaur films come into the fray, something that stands on its own and has more accurate dinosaurs in it. I think that would be more ideal.
I just think Jurassic Park's going to be Jurassic Park at this point. Let them do what they want to do, you know?
Yeah, just...
Even though if that's given a bad influence to the rest of, you know, popular culture, at this point, it's reached this god status in films that so little can achieve. And even though a lot of them do have their flaws, it's slightly frustrating, but, like, at this point, we really shouldn't expect much. They had their chance with the Jurassic World reboot being a soft reboot of the franchise, kind of riding out Lost World and 3. So some fan outcry, self included, except for dinosaurs, as we say. But besides that, as you said, really, do we want Jurassic Park to even continue at this point? I honestly don't, but that's another topic for another day. More or less just they had a chance. They would have botched it either way. So it's a blessing and a curse, shall we say.
I honestly think, just a little bit unrelated, but I do think feathers could actually be a good breath of fresh air for it. I hear a lot of people saying they like scales aesthetically more, or the dinosaurs wouldn't be scary if they had feathers.
If I could
I don't
cut
think
in
they've
just for
ever
a second,
seen a dog charge at them.
yeah,
But same thing with the bird. The feathers or hair, they'll stand up on end. You just gotta see them in action.
yeah. Now, I would like to, if I could add something to that real quick. You know, one thing that I will say in defense of the producers of Jurassic Park is that feathers would be a lot more difficult to render for the CGI. But then again, you know, I mean, they've gotten through similar hurdles like that in other films. So,
well, to be fair though, only a couple of the dinosaurs would really need to be feathered. You've got things like T-Rex and Hadrosaurs that wouldn't really need feathering. Really, it'd only be the Dromaeosaurs.
Yeah.
Well, they're you're going to anger a large side of DeviantArt with that, with one of those choices.
I mean,
I agree with you. I'm warning you there, bud.
oh well.
Either they all have feathers or none of them have feathers.
That's another topic for another day.
Yeah.
I mean,
One I don't
gonna
want to
bring it up
touch
later.
I know you will, and it's going to drive me wild.
All right. Any final thoughts before we move on to the next topic?
I expect my Monsoon version of Jurassic Park in the morning on my door in UPS direct mail from Japan.
I say they mocap some cassowaries for the next Jurassic World.
All right. And now for our final topic. Pal, you're up.
Excellent. So, let's talk about that big, beautiful, ugly bastard. The
Well,
most
we're leaving
overrated
family out of
yet
this.
underrated beast. The 9-ton Thanksgiving dinner that can crush cars.
Tarbosaurus.
Turbo ain't 9 tons. No, we're talking about T-Rex proper.
Ugh.
Oh, come on. It's criminally underrated and underrepresented in media.
Yeah, it's such an obscure dinosaur. Since
I didn't say it was
ever since
obscure, I just
Brontosaurus
said
came back, it just took its throne back. No one's thinking about T-Rex anymore. Nothing. It's all Brontosaurus nowadays.
So anyways, my topic is basically T-Rex's real-life movie monster. First and foremost, its size. Kind of the thing that's most misrepresented about it, at least if you go by some GDIs done by Franois Random and a few other people. And, well, I guess some by Hartman. You essentially get the results that T-Rex is heavier than Spinosaurus and Giganotosaurus, basically any other theropod, by quite a sizable margin. The ranking being T-Rex is 8 tons, as in metric tons. And then you get a slow descending of Spinosaurus at 7.5, almost all the large carps at roughly 7 tons. And further descending with other theropods. Very highly contested and debated on internet forums, I'll say. Let's see. The thing is built pretty heavily in comparison to these other theropods as well, which is why it's able to get to these weights. It's got a much wider torso in proportion, most likely to accommodate lungs for its inferred lifestyle of endurance running. It's also built for bone crushing and, well, out of all the theropods on land, has the highest bite force. The thing is that it lived with, covered in horns, spikes, armor plating. Some studies by, what was his name? Carr, I believe, Thomas Carr, have pointed towards a lack of lips. Very, very controversial as well. Just thought I'd mention it. The animal's behavior is theorized to at least be very aggressive due to the amount of lesions, bite marks, and scratches. All the pathologies on Tyrannosaur skulls, suggesting a nerve-specific combat, and the very factor of Y-Rex having its entire tail ripped off while alive. Tyrannosaurs covered in wrinkles, most likely had a lot of scales with very little feathering outside of maybe an elephantine fuzz. Essentially, T-Rex was, from a practical standpoint, a real-life movie monster. And there's not much I can really say about that beyond that at the moment.
Very interesting.
There's also I guess I should have brought this up, but I didn't think about it. You also have the factor of almost everything changing to accommodate the presence of Tyrannosaurus. You see marginocephalians growing longer, sharper horns with a little bit different orientations. You also got Ankylosaurus evolving into a more round shape to repel the bite. You also got sauropods like Alamosaurus being very long-legged and compact torsoed with lots of spikes along their sides. You got Edmontosaurus getting a very long tail, which most likely allowed it to rear up and kick with its front legs, as opposed to some other hadrosaurs. And that's pretty much it.
In the words of one of my favorite British comedians, that's a very thorough answer. It's a pity I wasn't listening. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah,
gotta love how our greatest, like, giant dinosaur, the true American dinosaur, is a trash compactor on leg. In all sense of the word. No.
Pretty much, yeah.
Living bulldozer.
A multi-purpose shredder.
Actually, yeah, no, not a shredder. He just, like, compresses everything. You will simply... It's such a weird anatomy for an animal.
Oh my god, there was this skit on, I don't know if you guys ever watched this, but on Cartoon Network a few years ago, there was their version of Mad. And there was this skit that I guess they cut from the show or something like that, but it was of the car, Lightning McQueen, getting put into a compactor. Now just imagine, like a Hypsilophodon in a T-Rex's jaws. Think about what you're doing here.
The difference would be it'd just be a large crush noise.
Yeah.
One bite.
But yeah, there's certainly a lot about T-Rex to talk about. Let me ask you, again, I guess, I'm sorry, Paleo Dude, did you have something you wanted to say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, can we, like, stop with T-Rex and, like, focus on other stuff? Like, I love T-Rex as much as everyone, but, like, maybe he gets a little too much funding, in my opinion.
Think of it this way. If we get T-Rex out of the way now, we can skip out on later episodes.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about the podcast. I'm talking about real life. It's like, well, we barely know anything about, you know, Triassic Antarctica, but of course, T-Rex, any specimen T-Rex that comes up automatically gets full funding, you know?
I mean, it's kind of like T-Rex in paleontology is basically like pandas of research and conservation. Essentially, it draws all the funding in.
Yeah.
It's the face of paleontology.
If I could kind of expand on that, you know, that's something that I've wanted to say about T-Rex for quite some time. In many ways, if you want to know what the popular culture tends to think about dinosaurs as a whole, you typically look at the way that they depict their T-Rexes, because T-Rex is kind of like a paleontological culture barometer, if that makes any sense. I mean, think about how many kids eventually, throughout the 20th and the 21st century, how many of them got interested in dinosaurs in the first place because of T-Rex, and this ultimately led to some significant discoveries. Ultimately, Tyrannosaurus Rex, in many ways, is kind of the cultural ambassador, not just for the dinosaurs, but in many ways, the entire prehistoric world. And that's a lot. That's a big responsibility weighing on this one animal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It doesn't help it much that none of its most interesting features that make it so different from other theropods aren't really focused on.
Yeah, it's always just
T-Rex could munch through a car. Isn't that awesome?
It has.
I mean, never mind the factor of it having a lot of keratin-based armor on its head, feature scales on the sides of its head. Probably some of the thickest, wrinkliest, gnarliest armored skin of any theropod.
Enough of that pussy.
But-
His mouth was basically filled with railroad spikes.
Get that boy some chapstick. But, yeah. I think the problem with T-Rex is, there's not much you can say about him anymore. Everyone's done a take on T-Rex, He's gone through so many changes throughout his life, and it's just... There's a point where oversaturation seemingly... It's almost like video games in a way, where everyone likes something, and there's always going to be contrarians who are like, oh, everyone likes this, must suck then. And I'm not saying like that, but I feel as though T-Rex kind of deserves that in a way. And I know I'm going to get hate for that, but let's give, I think, some other theropods time in the spotlight. And God forbid, let's hope it's not Spinosaurus or the world to be shaken apart. I think he's had a chance. I'm saying I don't know, Karka, I guess. Give him some love.
yeah. Now
You got me a good idea there. You were saying how essentially T-Rex hogging the spotlight so much created not really resentment, but wanting to have something else different, interesting flavored. I think that might actually be partially what was responsible for Spinosaurus and Giganotosaurus being thought of as larger than T-Rex in the first place. They were extremely fragmentary when found, and essentially people might have filled in the gaps with something larger than there was because, hey, more interesting having a larger animal.
Yeah, that and the fact, I have a bigger dinosaur than you discovered. Ha, look at me. I got the bigger car. It's like a dick measuring contest, as we can say.
And that led to the popularity of these dinos.
God, and then Carnivora Forum, I won't get into them, but you guys stop, please. It's a plead.
But I do have to ask one question though. The sheer popularity that you see with T-Rex, is this do you guys think is this a global thing, or is this just an American thing? Because if you look at other countries, they sometimes seem to put more emphasis on more cultural emphasis on other kinds of dinosaurs, particularly ones that come from where they are, typically. I've noticed, in some Western countries, like the UK and parts of Europe, Allosaurus, for example, tends to be more or less as popular as T-Rex tends to be, or just a little bit less.
That's very possible.
But then again, think how many pieces of media with dinosaurs in them exclude T-Rex.
Yeah, that's true. There's not that many that do that. Planet Dinosaur,
Outside
honestly,
of documentaries.
Planet Dinosaur,
But even
honestly,
then,
is
most documentaries have at least one Tyrannosaurid.
yeah. I mean, again, I was going to say, Planet Dinosaur is the only one that I can think of that excluded T-Rex specifically. But again, like you said, it featured
Daspletosaurus
and Zunityrannus, which I can't really find that much info on. I tried looking them up.
It's not exactly described from what I've heard.
That's what I thought.
And that's not really the formal name.
It's
It's a name they
Alamotamus.
made up.
It's Alamotyrannus Part 2 Electric Boogaloo.
I think it's earlier, though. Campanian.
Part 1.5.
The prequels.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the prequels. Oh god.
Obi-Wan versus Sammy.
Imagine the absolute death and destruction that would be caused by a dinosaur being named after Jar Jar. Just instead of Zuni's Tyrannus, it's Jar Jar Tyrannus, or
Oh my God.
Tyrannosaurus Jar Jai, something like that.
I honestly think it would be a dinosaur that would be named after it.
There would be protests
world's
and riots
largest
in the
carnivore.
streets. The Soviet Union would come back and declare war on the United States.
Guy.
Hitler would crawl out of his grave.
What?
The KKK started resurgence, all that. Yeah, just because of Jar Jar. God.
All right.
Yeah, you, George Lucas.
I guess getting kind of back on the topic though. Let me ask you for the benefit of, because there are some people out there that apparently are still debating this. T-Rex and Tarbosaurus, are they the same species or the same genus, I should say, or are they two separate genuses?
I've heard some debates that I've heard that it's been shifting recently to Tarbo being a species of Rex again. Honestly, this is above my caliber, but Tarbo and Zuchang, if you think about it, they're pretty much the only Tyrannosaurus-sized tyrannosaurs, and, well, they're roughly the same size, as I said before, and they have very similar builds, just one slimmer.
It doesn't help that there's been a lot of lumping of Asian Tyrannosaurids already. Raptorex, that's gone. Chanshansaurus, gone. But I just think on a morphology basis, it's a bit too similar to T-Rex in a lot of ways. I mean, it has the characteristic skull differences, and it is smaller, but in a way that could be argued, by a species shift. You look at modern. I know it's the worst analogy, but it's a good one for me. Is the is big cats. We have skull morphology differences between the different species of Panthera and even the different subspecies with tigers. And to say the least, I mean, species are incredibly hard to define, of course, by the fossil record, but my personal take after talking with Bill Carr and Holtz is probably lump them, like Tyrannosaurus beta and Tyrannosaurus rex, which would lead to quite a bit of an interesting conversation about the exchange of fauna between Asia and America during the late Cretaceous, to say the least.
A lot of parallels there seems to be between the transfer between the Cretaceous and really throughout much of the Cenozoic from that point from up until up until just 13,000 years ago. There seems to be a lot of interchange.
I'd say.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'd say that Tyrannosaurus rex. I think the genus is undersplit, or at the very least, the species is. This might be going slightly away from your question, but I suppose Tarbosaurus could be a species of Tyrannosaurus, and I can also see some splits. For example, maybe similar to Triceratops, you could have Anagensis T-Rex. Tyrannosaurus rex being late Cretaceous or late Maastrichtian. Meanwhile, earlier Maastrichtian Hell Creek could have, I don't know, Tyrannosaurus brownie or Hendricksoni or something. Then you have Alamo Tyrannus, which could be just a slimmer T-Rex similar to Tarbo and Zuchang.
That was
Speaking
actually.
about,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
if you're writing the paper on Alamo Tyrannus, please hurry up. We all need that. This is a personal plea. Please do it. Thank you.
that was actually what my next kind of question was going to lead into. What's the story on Alamo Tyrannus?
Just not described. Paper's not done yet, It exists. You just don't know where it fits because, nothing's been described.
As far as I know, it's almost identical to T-Rex remains, and it's the Elephant Butte Tyrannosaur as well as a couple other skull fragments. I was able to piece together a skull composite. Yeah, I'll just look this up later and give you reference material.
All right. Was there anything else that we wanted to talk about for T-Rex, or do we want to just go ahead and move on to the Q&A?
I'd personally like to say I'm quite impressed with the new Sue mount, very least. That's 1 point for you, Rex. 1 point for you. Don't screw it up.
And I'm immediately going to subtract that point by saying Trix is posed so that people can take selfies. And as far as I know, the skull's the real skull, and it's within human grabbing range. This is not good.
God.
Please save this T-Rex. It needs to be put into a loving home.
Get some some cave divers in, scoot them up, save their boys.
Release it back into the wild.
Yeah, God, that joke's not going to age well.
No, it's not. Thank you for instantly dating this podcast.
It's a time capsule, boys.
All right. So I guess we're ready to move on to the Q&A section of our podcast.
Yeah.
Our first question comes... Say again?
Yeah, the thing is, we don't have questions, dangling, or unless you wrote some.
I've got the questions right
here.
here.
Asked in advance.
Yeah, I've got the questions right here.
Whoa!
All right. Our first question comes to us from Kid Galactus, who asks, if you could de-extinct any animal, what would it be, and what would you do with the resulting creature? Alternatively, what is up with that squarish bit on the snout of Sue's skeleton? You can see it really well on the profile.
Well, I can answer part of the Sue thing. I think it's primarily a good amount of Tyrannosaurus morphology changes a lot. Well, at least between specimen and specimen. I mean, you can compare Stan to Sue, and they look completely different, almost, or at least very unique in their own special way. I think partially it's either morphological damage before or after death, and a combination of just it being a unique, more unique individual. I mean, we don't have the problem with Sue is we don't have a Tyrannosaurus of a comparable age to it, so we don't know if her features are standard for Tyrannosaurs at that age, or if they are unique to Sue. And I think that's a problem with a lot of the fossil records. We don't have that comparable, the ability to compare anything a lot of the time. And as for one animal I'd personally de-extinct, probably thylacine, just, because there is that same niche for it left.
Very interesting. I'm kind of in the same boat as far as de-extinction would go. I'd be more focused on animals that would be better adapted for life in the present. Like, I've heard some interesting stuff revolving around the woolly mammoth. How if we reintroduce that might stop that might help slow down global warming, supposedly. Now, I'm not exactly sure where I fit on that, but honestly, yeah, I think I would probably go with like either the woolly. For me, it's a tie between either the woolly mammoth or some kind of saber tooth, like Smilodon. something like that.
A little addendum to your mammoths that also bring back a lost biome, mammoth tundras.
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of, for those of you who don't know who haven't heard this before, the idea is that if you introduce mammoths and other large herbivores that once existed in the area, what they'll do is, as they eat steppe grasses, they poop them out and spread the seeds as a result of that, and that would, over time, replace the moss-covered areas up in the high Arctic, which tend to produce a lot of greenhouse gases. It would slowly replace them with grass, and because moss is such a high outputter for these greenhouse gases as it decays, it would effectively cut that process out entirely. So, again, I don't know exactly how much I agree with that, but I think that that's an interesting possibility, and it certainly wouldn't hurt anything. And I think ultimately, if you did that, how many species do you think how many large animal species that are native to the high Arctic, things like caribou or reindeer, I guess it would be,
Muskox,
Przewalski's wild horses, Saiga antelope, and all these other animals, that would be a lot more habitat that could support these animals. And if that
Saiga, especially considering they're having incredible problems with population and illness.
Yeah, exactly.
I do wish the best for those. They're adorable in their own stupid little way.
Yes. They are pretty cool, aren't they?
Yeah. All right, pal. What you got any thoughts on Sue or or an animal you would de-extinct?
With Sue, I'd like to say one whole half of the skull's practically caved in. And as far as I know, you got other specimens of at least comparable size. Sue might be the oldest. I'm not sure how old some other specimens like Trix and Scotty are, which get pretty close in size. Although I guess I was talking about age there, not so much geological age. And that's all I'll say on that part of the subject.
And then what about... yeah.
As far as de-extincting animals go, I kind of support the idea of de-extincting a lot of fauna, especially since a lot of modern-day environments kind of relied on them. I couldn't really pick a single species from modern day because I think that there's just too much you'd need to bring back to pick one. And if anything, I'd be wasting it on a plant. Specifically American chestnut. But, so I'd have to say I'd be wanting to bring back. For this, I'll just choose something impractical and probably stupid and shouldn't be brought back.
And that would be?
Good question. I haven't figured that out yet.
Yes.
I don't know. I'd love to say T-Rex, but I don't think they'd survive.
Yeah, probably not. Unless you put them in like a zoo or something like that. But that's a topic for another podcast entirely.
Indeed. And I want to spoil it so bad.
Calm yourself, child. Calm yourself.
Don't worry, we'll get to it. Not tonight, but eventually.
I don't know. I'd kind of want to bring back a Diplodocus of some sort, or maybe a Thyreophorine as a coffee table replacement.
Oh, God.
Yes.
I just imagine this moving coffee table.
It's a little butler. give him a little tie and everything, a little bell around his neck, he'll ring it.
And hey, if you've got a guest over that you don't particularly like, just like train it so that every time you click or snap your fingers, wax him with his tail.
Just kneecap. Oh God, I think I might change my answer.
Or hey, if you got like a small like notosaurid, like a Edmontoni or something like that, Just tell him
It's
to kill
small.
him.
It's like a hippopotamus.
Tripawpasaurus.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
God.
All right. Our next question comes to us from Megabase22, who asks, what prehistoric animal / animals capture your imagination the most and why?
Wait, could you repeat the latter half of the question?
Yeah, sure. What prehistoric animals capture your interest the most and why?
Thank you.
That's a good
Hal, why
question.
don't you start it off? I started it the last time,
All
so I
right.
might as well give you a chance.
Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
I'm not entirely sure on that one. They're all interesting in their in their own unique ways. But I guess I'd have to go with Stegosaurus because it's such an odd animal. Even though it's more like other stegosaurs, it's one of the few vertebrates that I know of that are asymmetrical along the x-axis.
How do you mate?
That's an easy one. They probably just backed up, turned their tails away, and then took their 4 foot long. Yeah, and this is. We'll wait for our audience to get a little bit older before we answer the rest.
Oh, God.
Now, not to mention, the animal filled the niche that isn't really anymore. A almost purely cycad specialist. And a large grazer at that.
And then,
Good answer.
and then Spinosaurus fan 69420 in the comments goes, but there was no grass in the Jurassic. How could it be a grazer?
To quote Jeff Goldblum, well, first of all, how dare you? Oh, God. That's,
One
I
last
expect that.
point I'd like to make on Stego. As far as I know, there's no studies that tell you how the plates grew. As far as I knew, they just grew outwards, and so they have these circular rings of growth. The reason I'm very interested in this is I think it could potentially determine the type of pattern that the plates would have had.
Interesting.
Interesting point.
So if any paleontologist wants to, post a study like that, I would be very grateful.
On, folks. We need answers.
It's,
All right. I have this problem where anything that looks overly goofy or like really cute tends to like capture my attention for the next year. So lately, I think the biggest thing that captured my imagination or kind of really has me interested is the idea is as darkids as a whole. The, Quetzalcoatlus, Hatzegopteryx, the big boys, say. The fact that a giraffe-sized animal with a head that is nearly larger in length than the entirety of its body is insane. And the fact that it can fly without a running start, unlike anything we know today, and fly well, is just insane to me. And the very least, I mean, it's just goofy looking, and I love it. It's a dumb answer because, everyone expects a dinosaur, right? And I know there's gonna be someone in the comments like, "Oh, but they are a dinosaur." It's like, no. Yeah, probably either as darkids or dinocephalians. I really love early Permian / late Permian / Triassic synapsids. I think those are pretty interesting to look into.
the thing
Yeah,
that makes...
thanks for the...
I'm sorry, go keep going.
I said thanks for the question.
Well, for me, it was when it comes to the Astrokids, if I can just add something to that, the thing that interests me is just how such a huge animal, how an animal like that with as long of a neck as it has can have that big of a head. You know what I mean? and not only be able to support itself, but also fly. It's so crazy, just from an anatomy standpoint. But for me, personally, with the animal that tends to interest me, I think, like, it really kind of depends on what exactly we're talking about here. But in terms of an animal that can get me thinking quite a lot about it, I think that answer would be the saber-toothed cats. There's just something, to me, like, there's just something kind of magical about what these animals were like. And one of the big points that really interests me in particular when it comes to something like Smilodon or Homotherium or all these other animals is that this was a creature that early humans, well, I guess they would be modern humans, but Paleolithic humans definitely encountered, or at the very least had a high likelihood of encountering things like Megonterion, Homotherium, Smilodon, and yet there are no cultural works of these animals anywhere in archaeological record. There's no ivory carvings. There's no cave paintings. There's nothing. At least nothing that is undisputable. I mean, there's that one ivory carving that supposedly is of a Homotherium, but one is lost, and two, it's just one piece of evidence. So it was probably a lion. So that's the thing that kind of interests me. What do you guys think about that? The fact that saber.
I'm kind of thinking they probably weren't encountered very often due to think about it this way: mountain lions and other animals. They'll come through a lot of states, ranging very far to go to different hunting areas and stuff. They're very stealthy animals. A mountain lion could be crouched down in the bushes and you wouldn't even know.
You'd probably smell it. That's besides the point.
In Africa, they say that a leopard, you will only see a leopard if the leopard wants you to see you. Wants you to see him. But, like, yeah.
That could explain the rarity of archaeological evidence.
But yeah, the saber-tooths, whenever those creatures come up, I always find myself thinking an awful lot about what this particular group of cats were like, and it does make me think about just about everything. What did they have lips covering their teeth, or were they more exposed? Were they pride hunters, or were they pack hunters, or what? And it's just an infinite level of intrigue for me when it comes
if
to
I may add a point, you know the black hole theory of evolution, or not evolution, but extinction. Essentially, humans ate animals, and essentially they shoved the animals through their black hole. Essentially, most of the megafauna is gone because they were eaten off. I'd assume saber pretty much just died off because of the lack of prey items.
We outvored them.
Yeah, as opposed to humans killing saber-teeth directly.
It's interesting because
It's usually how it goes.
It's interesting because, like, I remember hearing from somewhere that one thing that, like, pioneers would often talk about is how good mountain lion meat actually tasted. And there definitely is evidence that the Clovis people ate American lions. We do have evidence of that, but yeah, I don't. There's a, but yeah, I mean, I could go into a lot of detail about that, but yeah. All right, so I guess.
So what you're saying is you want to eat one?
No, but what I am saying is that there definitely is a precedent for humans eating cats for some reason. All right. Our next question comes to us from Gwibber49, who asks, Aren't dragons awesome or what?
I lost my cousin to a dragon. He tied him to the railroad track.
Was this like a dragon gang?
But, you know, yeah, the Crips, they recruit dragons now. Pretty intense.
There you go.
But in all seriousness, yeah, you know, dragons are pretty okay. Like, depends on what kind of dragon we're talking about, what media we're coming from. Because, like, dragons, if handled poorly, can be really lame. And I don't want to hurt your feelings about this, but God, there's some pretty bad dragon designs out there if you look hard enough.
Yeah, there really are. But it's
Disney's Pete's dragon. God, that was bad.
Or Puff the Magic Dragon. Anybody remember that?
I'd say I too like Scansauropterids. Yeah, they're a good dragon as opposed to a bad dragon.
Yeah. But you know, it's interesting because this kind of gives me an opportunity to bring this up. Have you guys ever heard of that one theory regarding how dragons, the myth of dragons, actually came about?
You told me about this at an earlier point, but might be a good thing to reiterate for the audience.
Okay, so I think it came out in the year 2000. It was this theory, but studies have been done that ultimately contributed going back as far as like the 20th century. In the 1930s, there was an anthropologist who was working in the Amazon, and he was studying howler monkeys. And one thing that he noted was that howler monkeys had 3 distinct calls that they made whenever there was a predator, and each call denoted a different kind of predator, and it told them to respond in different ways. One call would tell the rest of the family that there was a snake, and this would tell all of them to get up into the trees. Another call would tell them that there was a hawk, and that would tell them to get down from the trees. And the third call told them that there was a pantherine type predator, so like a jaguar or a puma or something like that. And this would tell them to get out onto the farthest end of the tree branches where these predators simply couldn't follow them. And what this has to do with the dragons, though, is the theory is that dragons are essentially a cross between a snake, a cat, and a bird of prey. And what happened as a result of this is our ancestors feared these a lot, but they compartmentalized them into what is essentially a chimera. And you can kind of see something. This is actually something that I heard in a Jordan Peterson talk. One thing that he pointed out was that if you show a cat to a baby, and the baby calls it a bunny rabbit or a dog, he's actually the proper response is not to say, oh, that's not correct. No, what's going on here is the baby has essentially compartmentalized the cat into the same category as the dog and the bunny rabbit, and that category being the pet category, or soft things that I like to touch. And it's sort of this, and you can kind of, the theory is that that's essentially what the dragon is. It's the predator category, or the danger category. All 3 of these animals have been sort of merged together over time, subconsciously, to form a single predator. As the book described it, the first, the oldest, the most basic monster. And as a side note to that, it also might explain why some dragons in different cultures have the ability to breathe fire, because it's possible that our ancestors put fire in the same category as these predators, essentially converting it into the danger or fatal category.
The danger zone?
Yeah.
Danger zone!
Out of curiosity, do a lot of Asian places have lot of snakes are poisonous reptiles. Kind of tie this to a talk about the second topic.
I believe so. I mean, you have a large majority of vipers throughout. Viperidae is most common in Asia and Australia. You know, the higher temperatures. Just depends on what part of Asia you're talking about.
I'm thinking mainly like more temperate areas of China and Japan. Just thinking maybe their depiction of a dragon is a lot different culturally because they might not bump into snakes as much, for instance. There might not be as large birds of prey as well. Now, granted, I don't really know that much about European fauna. I just know there's a lot of large birds, at very like lammergeiers and stuff.
The shrike. All right.
All right.
Is there any more questions, or?
Yeah, we got 2 more.
Okay.
All right. Our second to last question comes to us from Evo Dolka. I think I'm saying that right. How long have you been
I
interested?
think there's a V in there, but I could be wrong.
Evo Dolka.
E.
Dolka. How long have you been interested in paleontology?
V-Cube, you want to start it off?
Yeah. Well, my father he was training to become a paleontologist, but ultimately had to drop out. Yeah, his area of study was going to be on Cambrian invertebrates because this is Missouri, and basically all we've got here are, look, quite literally, we've only got one area that has Cretaceous sediment, and it's on, and it's in the boot heel, which is that little bit sticking out at the bottom right corner of the state, and it's all the entire sedimentary deposit. The only one known is on a ranch that is privately owned. But everywhere else, basically, it's all Mississippian and Pennsylvanian and Devonian and all kinds of basically all Paleozoic ocean deposits. So there's a lot of crinoid stems. There's a lot of brachiopods. Very few fish, surprisingly. Like that was something we used to do all the time, is go out to different rock cuts and stuff like that. And I was always hoping that I'd find a vertebrate fossil of some kind, like a fish or an amphibian or something. Of course, that never happened, but you know. But yeah, I mean, I guess I've always kind of had an interest in. I guess I've always more or less had some kind of interest in paleontology, but I've always had an interest in animals. So, and giant monster movies. That was another big one that got me interested in dinos. I remember when my dad showed me Godzilla King of the Monsters when I was a kid, when I was 5 years old. I haven't quite been the same since. It's been a downward spiral ever since. Downward spiral, downward spiral, downward spiral.
You probably wouldn't believe me if I told you this, but legitimately, dinosaur was my first word. I'm not even lying to you.
That's not too surprising.
My mom was surprised and angry as well. You know, not my mom, my dad, dinosaur. She's still mad at that today. But very early age, I can't remember what I watched first, either Jurassic Park or Walking with Dinosaurs. But you know, as you do, every little boy usually has a dinosaur phase of some kind. And I just think I never really grew out of it, you know? Kind of smack dab in the middle between 3 giant dinosaur-focused museums, and you get this horrible man-child that is me. But I think it was just a lot of perfect... It was just like a lot of the conditions were just right. Like Evolving Planet, the Field Museum had just opened. Zoo was still relatively new there, and the dinosaur media was still relatively fresh. Jurassic Park 3 was going to come out. It was just, you know, everything was just lined up perfectly, you know?
Yeah. And Palp, what about you?
Honestly, all the way far back as pre-K, I've been fascinated with them. I don't know what it was about them. Perhaps it was just the interesting array of colors on these weird lizards that stood up on their hind legs. Didn't really see Jurassic Park until quite late in my life. I saw the Brachiosaur scene one point way earlier, but I didn't really see the actual movie for the most part. Pretty much grew up watching. I didn't really see too much video of dinosaurs. I guess I saw Walking with Dinosaurs, which was VHS recorded a while ago. Never really knew the name of the series at that point. Essentially, just got into it through the ages, and back then I didn't really know birds were dinosaurs, but I've always loved birds.
If I could
Bird up.
say that again, I'm sorry.
Bird up.
Yeah, bird up. If I could add something to this question, what made you guys decide to start producing dinosaur-related content for the internet?
I'm a freeloader. I don't produce much. But kind of getting into it, it's we'll start growing out of dinosaurs, and like that's a horrible thing to say, but it's not exactly accounting levels of maturity, But I think it's just looking for more people like me led me to a lot of the communities. I started off back in the Zoo Tycoon 2 community when I was a wee bab. And still kind of to this day. Kind of dying off, but, what little was there was fun. But, just kind of mosey it on in,
And Peleop, what about you?
It was back in the 1800s, and I just graduated from medical school. And I was going into the Air Force, and I decided, it's not. In all honesty, it's not major. I've always been an artist in some ways, except for that one year I quit and didn't draw a single thing. I was a stupid child. Well, anyways, I had a love for drawing, love for dinosaurs, put two to two together, and then multiplied by being an attention whore. And essentially, it snowballed from people I know in real life not giving enough attention to, I can probably grace the internet with depictions of dinosaurs no one has ever seen depicted exactly this way.
Very true.
Yeah, and various shades of brown.
To be fair, I didn't really know too much about pigments way back in the day, so I had freaking bright pink and magenta Mojoceratops. I had Argentinosaurus with red veins going through a black scaly hide. I had a freaking bright green Lafferhoffen with black stripes and red spots.
Interesting.
What about you, Alex?
And a freaking blue Albertosaurus. Completely feathered. It looked like Cookie Monster.
The Cookie Monster.
Bones instead of cookies,
The
I could probably give you guys the image.
Cookie Venator Gigas.
Yeah. Cookie Venator Sesame. Cookie Hunter from Sesame.
It's great. There should be a dinosaur named after that. For me, I guess.
Here it is.
Well, for me, I guess it was just I kind of wanted to go into creature design at first, but then, I started drawing more dinosaurs, and I started learning more about them again, and this time going into a lot more depth with it. Like, if you look at some of my depictions of dinosaurs when I was in high school, I mean, that's one that should give you an instance of. I mean, I've been drawing dinosaurs even long before that, but they were really bad. They were more mammal-inspired. But as time went on, I thought to myself, if I'm going to keep doing this, I might want to start getting a little bit more accurate. And slowly, as time went on, I just kind of, I tried getting a little bit more accurate as time with each different depiction, and I always end up trying something different. And for whatever reason, I guess I just kind of stuck with dinosaurs. It just kind of, and other prehistoric animals. It just kind of flowed right into it. All right, and for our final question, Killer Corvid asks, "Will you marry me?"
I was wondering if this was going to be the final question. We can't just end on this.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? You kind of cut out from me.
Killer Corvid asks, "Will you marry me?"
No.
No.
No. Sorry. Three-way no.
That's a no for me, buddy.
That's a no for the chat.
Yeah.
All right.
But, you'll find someone.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I don't know you. Could be like a murderous pedophile or something. I don't know. It's
Make
not
sure
to
that-
assume, but,
Just make sure that you do it quick, otherwise you're going to spend the rest of your life alone, and then you die. Alone. All right.
To be fair, for all we know, it could be a mammoth.
Very true.
we've doomed the mammoths.
Woof woof. I'm an actual dog.
Or even Bigfoot.
All right. I guess that's pretty
Everyone's
much
got a
it.
social media account at this point.
Any final words from anybody?
I'll pass on the bad dragons. I'm not a big fan of them.
You'll never take me alive, Cabears.
And I've pretty much got nothing else to say. Thank you very much for coming down and listening to a trio of pseudo-intellectuals ramble about stuff well outside of their expertise. I look forward to... I would like to thank our panel of judges, Paleop and Paleo Dude, even though they're not actually judges. I don't know why I said that.
I'm a Supreme Court Marshal. What are you talking about?
Can I be not only judge and jury, but execution?
Be sure
the Senate.
Be sure to leave a comment down below. Be sure to punch that like button right in the face. And
Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon.
yeah, don't forget to hit
Which
that
also
bell.
doesn't do anything.
And also,
at this
if
moment.
you could, please turn off that pesky ad block. And
Join our free gift card giveaway.
yeah, I've also got
Buy our merch.
buy our merch.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Be sure to follow us on. Be sure if you have a DeviantArt account, you can watch me there, or you can follow me on Tumblr for occasional updates. I don't use it all that often, but occasionally I post there. And I'll just end by saying, where we started. For a world with much to discover, for what is, what was, and what could be, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.